All right. Shalom, Israel. Shalom. Can everybody hear me all right? If I can get a one in the chat if y'all can hear me all right, I'd appreciate it. Make sure y'all can hear me. Can I get a one in the chat if y'all can hear me okay? Or y'all can let me know you can't hear me. Let's see. All right, all right. We got a couple ones. Shalom, we are the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started out at 1 West 125th Street under Commander General Yohana, and since 1969, we have been teaching the truth of the Bible. We are not affiliated with any other Christian or Israelite organization or Christian group. Tonight is Virginia's history class. Before we get too far into the history class, we're going to clap it up real quick for the Day of Atonement. Just ended a few minutes ago. The water for everybody coming in, and to everybody who might be have a plate in front of them right now. To wild job, to wild job. Day of Atonement. This is my second Day of Atonement since I've been in the truth. It is not necessarily an easy thing, but it is a thing that each of us can do and that we are required to do for the Most High. So that is always what the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge builds on, to make sure we are keeping the high holy days, keeping our holy convocation days, making sure that we are doing what the Most High requires of us, and making sure we're not doing what the Most High does not allow us to do. All right. So, again, since 1969, we have been teaching the truth of the Bible. That if, that so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians are the true children of the Bible. We are the true Jews. We are the house of Israel, collectively the children of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. And if you are, or if your father is a so-called Black, Hispanic, or Native Indian, then you are also one of the 12 tribes of Israel. We have been teaching, and it is true that our communities are in the states that they are in, because as a whole, we, as the children of Israel, do not follow the law, statutes, and commandments. We do not ensure that we, as a whole, are keeping the dietary laws. We don't ensure, as a whole, that we are following each and every one of the laws, statutes, and commandments that the Most High gave us. Making sure we're not celebrating Christmas, making sure we're not celebrating the Easter holidays, Esau's holidays, Salakia, this world's holidays, um, our birthdays. All of those things are against the Most High. And because as a whole, we, again, specifically as Blacks, Hispanics, and so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians, because we don't keep those laws, our communities are in the shape that they're in. They are absolutely destroyed. As a whole, we are destroyed as a people. And until we come back to these laws, statutes, and commandments, we will continue to be destroyed. This is what the Most High prophesied. This is what the prophets, like the prophets prophesied, was going to happen. Moses told the children of Israel that these things are going to happen. They were going to come to pass. He got that from the Most High. That's in the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. We'll get into some of that tonight. But these are the things that we have to understand as a people, and have to wake up as a whole, so we can fix our communities, so that we can ensure that brothers aren't unaliving each other, all because of drugs and gangs. These are things that run rampant in our communities. Single motherhood is a thing that runs rampant in our communities. Brothers getting with sisters and throwing them away is a thing that runs rampant in our communities. Sisters sleeping with multiple men are things that run rampant in our communities, and especially single motherhood. That it become, and each of them, to be honest, brothers throwing sisters away, sisters sleeping with multiple men. That those type of things lead to, in a lot of ways, to single parent homes, which then destroys the next generation. And that's why, that's one of the reasons that we cannot save ourselves. We cannot get ourselves right. We need the Most High through Yahweh Shah Mashiach, which is Jesus Christ in the Hebrew. We need to be in line with the Most High, following Yahweh Shah's lead and his leadership, because he is our king. We need to do that in order to get the protection that the Most High has removed from our people. All right. Now, we're going to get into some things tonight in the history class. We're going to talk about, as you all can see, the name of the class is America's Other Cash Crop. We're going to get into some of that. But at first, before we get into that, I want to say Yahweh Salaki. Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahshua to the brothers, Yahweh Shema Alathan Ba'Shem Yahshua to the sisters. We're going to do a roll call real quick. See who we got in the building. All right. My Rib is in the building. We got Trooper Kazaki in the building. Shalom, shalom. All right. Got Sister Tawana in the building. What's going on, sis? Shalom. All right. Officer Yagadar in the building. Shalom, brother. And Shamaga Bar in the building. All right. Shalom, shalom. Let me get you up there. There we go. All right. So, I said earlier, some of y'all might not have been in here, but we just, we closed up the Day of Atonement. A few minutes ago, I understand brothers might have some plates, sisters might have some plates in front of them. I'm going to give y'all some extra time, maybe to answer some questions tonight. I know your fingers and your hands might be busy. I understand that. That is absolutely too wild. All right. We got Stephen Baldwin in the building. Shalom, how about you, brother? All right. But before, as we get into it, I want to get y'all, thoughts. I'm going to get y'all minds going. What could, when the class says the America's Other Cash Crop, what pops up in anybody's mind? Who wants to give me some ideas of what they think it might be? I kind of alluded to it, I believe, in the last class, that I was going to get into this particular subject tonight. So somebody may know where I'm going with this, but y'all let me know who wants to give it a shot. All right. Who wants to give it a shot? What is America's other cash crop? Who wants to give it a shot? All right. All right. Shabbat said the schools taught us that tobacco is the cash crop. That's one of them. That's one of them. That is absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Who else want to give it a shot? Okay. All right. Give Chuba Shemaga Bar a hand. Brother said we are the cash crop. Now I think you're on the right track, but give me a little bit more. And if you can, I mean, who are the we? And explain, or just give me a little bit. You ain't gotta give me much on how we are the cash crop. All right. Let's see if we can do that real quick. Matter of fact, okay, Brother Stephen Baldwin said politics are America's other cash crop. All right. I think I see where you're going there. I'm not gonna say you're wrong. That's not the one I'm looking for though. That's not the one I'm looking for. That's a little further away from what I'm looking for. Matter of fact, before we, you know what, let's do this. Who can tell me what a cash crop is? How about that? Let's start there. Who can tell me what a cash crop is? Who can tell me what the definition of a cash crop is? Obviously, you Rosh Hashanah in the building. Shalom, Yalashan, Shalakatah. Who can tell me? Okay, here we go. All right. Zaki says something that brings money in, whether you're sleeping or awake. All right, I get where you're going there. I get where you're going there. All right, Chiba Shamaga Bar got a full answer. Let's see what he got. He said, Israelite, the cash crop. We push out the enemy's religion, make songs that the Jewish people make money off of, slave at jobs, still get taxes taken out. Okay, good answer. Good answer. All of that is true. All of that is true. All right. Not quite where I'm going, but y'all are definitely in the ballpark. All right. So I'm gonna go back and again let's get the definition of a cash crop. Let's get the definition of a cash crop. Who wants to try? Who can get it to me? The quote unquote official definition. Let me ask that because I see Trooper Kazaki gave he put forth the effort, but and you're not exactly wrong. You're not exactly wrong. There's a couple keywords I want to make sure we hone in on. All right. Who else wants to give it a shot? And y'all can actually I know we typically look up the definition of words, the Merriam-Webster's, and that is where you can find this. All right. Matter of fact, let me see if I can do something real quick. See if we can do this real quick. All right. All right. Let's see what we got here. Stephen Baldwin says corn is an American cash crop. That is true. That is absolutely true. All right. Let me see. Triple Kazaki says cash crop produced for its commercial value rather than for use by the grower. Coffee is an important cash crop. All right, that is definitely in line with what I'm looking for. Give Trooper Kazaki a hand and give Officer Yagadar a hand. Ready saleable crop produced or gathered for the market. All right. So Trooper Shemagabar was absolutely right when he said that we are the cash crops. Now, given the official definition, I'm trying to get y'all. I mentioned it in last class. I'm trying to see who may be able to pull what I'm referencing here. Right? Given the actual definition, how are we, as the children of Israel, the cash crop? Now, and let me put this in context. We're not talking about right now necessarily. We're talking about a specific time in history. How were we America's other cash crop? All right. Officer Yagadar says slaves then, inmates now. Okay. All right. That is along the right path. All right. Triple Jockey said the things we created. All right. Indirectly, I get exactly where you're coming from. All right. Triple Shamaga Bar said slavery. All right, y'all give my rib a hand. She said modern day slavery breeding ground. She had the closest answer. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is something that I don't know that we hear a lot about or have a full understanding historically of what it was. But I think, y'all give me a one in the chat if y'all have heard of slave breeding farms. Who has heard of that? Who has heard of slave breeding farms? So give me a one in the chat if y'all familiar. Slave breeding farms. Who's heard of those? Sister Nine in the building. How Shamala Thamba Shemi Shai says. Trooper Kazaki gave me one. He's heard about it. All right. Sister Nasa from slavery. Okay. All right. Obviously, Yagadar gave me a one. Okay. So, all right. Stephen Baldwin gave me a one. My rib gave me one. Okay. Everybody's heard of it. All right. All right. That's the one. That's the one. All right. So, if you think about it, right, slave breeding farms were for the a readily saleable crop, meaning our births, right? And it was produced or gathered primarily for market, meaning it was done only for the sale of our people, the sale of our children. It was to a point, and this is one of the things that a lot of people don't want to, especially a lot of the oppressor, they don't want to admit that that slavery was big business, not only because of the free labor that it allowed this country to produce, but the sale of us individually was big money. It became a larger cash producer and we became worth more than the quote unquote other cash crops combined. All right. And we're going to get into some of that tonight. So, but before we get there, um, who knows why America um, decided to end its participation in the transatlantic slave trade? Right, right. Just like farming animals, exactly. Now, farming animals, we don't call them a cash crop, we call them livestock. But It's the same idea, and that's, it's absolutely the same idea. It was produced not for we were purposefully and systematically um, reproduced, not for the use on, you know, the particular plantation, not because our mother and father happened to get together and we were born. None of that happened. It was very, very purposeful, and we're gonna get into that. All right. But again, who knows why? But one of the very, very driving forces. All right. The Officer Yagadar had to have a monopoly, to corner the market. It's exactly what it was. Because this is the deal. They had already, the America had already gotten to the point of having, um, um, breeding farms for us. Okay. But when you have that, but you still have our people being brought in on ships, well, now you got a diluting of the market. So it was a concerted effort on Congress's part to stop the transatlantic slave trade to increase the value of each and every one of our ancestors so that they could increase their wealth. So when this oppressor often says, well, we ended slavery, they're talking about we like they were some savior for us, like they did us a favor. No, even if you talk about just about the transatlantic slave trade, that was absolutely strategic on their part to create more wealth for them individually by increasing the value of their crop or their livestock. That was us. What's the more nonsense that y'all may have heard about slavery from this oppressor? What are some other comments that they make as far as how it ended, why it ended, so on and so forth? Who can give me some more on that? Sister I say make it harder to get us, meaning that's why that's why they stopped the transatlantic slave trade. Yes, because it made it harder for um, those who weren't focused on our reproduction to get us. Um, yes, that's absolutely true. They would basically have a lot fewer sources at the end of, well, I shouldn't say at the end. Over the course of this practice, Maryland and Virginia were the top two um, state exporters of enslaved Israelites. They were the top two exporters of enslaved Israelite. It was big business. All right. Uh, right. Give Trooper Kazaki a hand. This is one of the other things that they say. Abraham Lincoln ended slavery because it was wrong. When he said if he could have freed the slaves, he would. Right. Right. The quote is something along the lines of if I could save the Union by freeing none of the slaves, I would do that. If I could save the Union by freeing some of the slaves, I would do that. And if I could save the Union by freeing all of them, I would do that. His whole focus was about keeping the Union together. His entire focus was about keeping the Union together. And so much of that was economic because the South was the economic backbone directly tied to our enslavement. The South was the economic backbone that was directly tied to our enslavement. So if you allow those states to secede, then you've lost your economic backbone. So even that, it's not that, this is horrible and that's why it should stop. No, you all have too much control down there in the South. This is what Lincoln was thinking. Y'all got too much control down there in the South. That's why we got to stop slavery. Oh, y'all going to secede? Yeah, we can't let you walk away with all that. Nope. We're gonna put all this back together because the North needs it. You need all the wealth that you all have generated over these centuries. We're gonna have to make sure we get a piece of all of that, and we're gonna actually stop you from creating so much of it. It had nothing to do with any type of fond perspective, and he had this revelation that it was wrong. No, absolutely not. All right. So kind of they get us from them, they make more money. Right, right, right. Okay. Yeah. Just same thing. Same deal. They wanted to make it harder for people to continue to get these enslaved Israelites off of these ships coming in from out of the country. So guess what? We'll just create a um, Slovakia, an internal slave trade. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Give me. Might have to get into it so y'all get that. Nah, I still tell you. This is one of the things too that you hear oftentimes people say, well, we're all the same because or nobody's pure, quote unquote, pure, and there was so much sexual abuse going on at the time where the female enslaved Israelites had to were subject to the oppressor. So much of that went on. How can you don't know whether somebody was is quote unquote pure or not, or whether they're the result of a sexual abuse encounter. We have to be so careful on our verbiage. Y'all bear with me. But this is another example why of course it happened, right? Of course it happened, but we're gonna get into some of these numbers where you'll clearly see it was not happening on any level that was able to impact who we are to any great extent. All right, so we're gonna get into some of that again tonight. Um, Matter of fact, I'm gonna pull this scripture speaking about that same thing. A lot of people talk about people's different complexions and stuff like that. Of course, I'm a light skinned brother, so I hear it. You light skinned, so somebody in your family was, probably an oppressor and so on and so forth, right? I want to pull this scripture just so we can be very clear. And this is why the Israelite, this is why the ISUPK is the home of the truth, because we actually know and teach the Bible. This is Jeremiah 12:9. Says, my heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. This is the Most High talking about the children of Israel. We are his heritage. And he says that we are unto him as a speckled bird, meaning a bird of many colors. A bird of many colors. We as Israelites, children of Israel, come in an array of colors, which is why we here in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge are not we don't have colorism as an issue. We absolutely don't. There are brothers that are in the school who are so much lighter than me. There are brothers in the school who, they're some dark brothers. But that's what it is. Us as a people, we come in many different shades. All right. The scripture goes on. It says, "The birds round about are against her." Meaning, if we are a speckled bird, all these other birds are against us. They are our enemies, and we're going to get into some of that. How it's so much more. Another um, thing that you hear about the slave trade is that, oh well, it didn't impact that many people. There was only a few people who owned slaves, and so on and so forth. Most people didn't own them, and blah 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 blah. So whose fault is it? Is it really? Well, we're gonna get into all the impact, even from a financial perspective. Everyone benefited from our enslavement. All right. Um, but it says the birds around about are against her. All these nations are absolutely against us, which is why we need to come together and gather ourselves together, as Zephaniah 2:1 said. All right. But this scripture goes on. It says, "Assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour, come to devour." These beasts of the field, which again are these other nations, they are come to devour us. And we're gonna get into some of these things tonight. Give Trooper Kazaki a hand. He's absolutely right. It still impacts us to this day. As Officer Yagadar said earlier, back then it was outright slavery. Now it's incarceration. Now they do the same thing. They just do it through the prison system as they structured it in the 13th Amendment. All right. This is why they continue. This is why Shuba Kazaki said it continues to affect us even until today. All right. Um, okay. All right. We're going to get into some of this. Let me see. Where we at? All right. Let's share this article real quick. Window. We're gonna see how well this comes up. Again, I'm gonna have it here, but y'all may not be able to see it too well. That's all right. We're gonna work through what we need to. Trying to make that larger. Where is the button? There it is. Oh, no, it's too much. I knew that was gonna happen. All right. It says in the um, early 19th century, when the importation of enslaved people from Africa was banned, enslavers turned to breed farms to produce a self-sustained population of enslaved people. Now, if y'all remember, bring this down real quick. If y'all remember the class that we did on um, uh, dreadlocks and marijuana, if y'all remember that class, right? There was a time in Jamaica where they stopped importing enslaved Israelites. And that was right around the same time that America decided to do it because at the time, Jamaica was under British control. All right. So Britain stopped it first. So once they stopped it, though, matter of fact, I got another. Once they stopped it, they did not function the same way that these oppressors did here in America. All right. I'm going to give y'all this quote and see if y'all can give me an understanding of what the difference was. Y'all bear with me. Bear with me. Okay. It says in the Caribbean, meaning primarily Jamaica. Uh, it says I'm paraphrasing here because I can't bring myself to say these words. But the oppressor treated the slaves like disposable cogs in a machine, meaning, I'm going to keep it going. Disposable cogs in a machine, working them to death on sugar plantations and then replacing them with fresh stock from Africa. Because in the United States, the oppressor treated their slaves like the machine itself. So think about the difference there. If you have a machine that when it breaks down, you just gotta go buy another part, right? That's how you treat it like a car. This piece is gone. Let me go buy another part. Let me go buy another part. Let me go buy another part, right? What happens when your source for your parts shuts down? What happens when your source for parts shuts down? Who wants to tell me? Absolutely. Parts become more expensive and they're harder to allocate. Absolutely. Absolutely. And at some point, you may not be able to get the part at all. And once you can't get that part, then you can't use that machine, right? And if y'all remember what we talked about in that class, that was why they brought in the East Indians, because the Israelite slaves that they had started to die off. They couldn't get any more, so then they bring in cheap labor. It wasn't really slave labor; it was just cheaper labor. All right, but they were paying for it, and they allowed them to have their culture, have their had memory. If y'all remember, they brought in merchants so they could still celebrate all of their practices. They'll still have their culture, their heritage, all of that, which is why we then adapted and took on dreadlocks and marijuana. All right. But that's what they did in Jamaica. Okay. Stephen Baldwin says it's less functional. Absolutely. So you have to find an alternate thing. All right. But it says in the United States, though, they treated their slaves like the machine itself. Now, once this is the machine itself, and I've created this machine, then it's just on me to keep this machine going. And as a result of that, we have to figure out how to keep the parts generating from within. That's the idea. That's where this came from. All right, that was part of it anyway. All right. Um, okay, let's get back to this. All right. To turn the breed farms to produce self-sustaining population of enslaved people. These farms aim to make as many enslaved people as possible for sale and distribution throughout the South. Richmond, Virginia, and Maryland, and the Maryland Eastern Shore were home of the two largest breeding farms. All right, but again, for the sole purpose of sale and distribution. At this point, when the transatlantic slave trade stopped, America said, "You know what? I don't even need you. I don't even need you anymore enslaved people from outside. I just create my own." And that's a purposeful practice. I'm going to ask y'all a question real quick. We're going to get into it a little later. Who's heard of Stockman? Give me a one in the chat if you've ever heard of Stockman, and a two in the chat if you have not. And while y'all doing that, I'm going to keep going. It says Robert Lumpkin was one of the industry leaders in the slave breeding business. His jail, quote unquote, jail was a compound surrounded by a 12-foot fence with iron spikes. All right. So now I got two questions. Who's heard of Stockman? All right. And who's familiar with Robert Lumpkin? Give me a one in the chat and which one you're familiar with, or both. Give me a two in the chat if you're not familiar with either one. All right. Okay, no sweat. Sister Rod says she is not familiar with either one. No sweat. We're gonna get into it. Who else? One if you're familiar, and two if you're not. All right, no sweat. Oh, so Yaga Dog gave me it too. I must be in some deep information tonight because Officer Yaga Dog gave me it too. I'm gonna pat myself on the back a little bit because Officer Yaga Dog got all the information. Salaki. Salaki. All right. We're gonna keep it moving for time's sake. All right, y'all can still put your ones and twos in the chat. Let me know which one is which. All right. All right. Let me see. All right, so y'all can see that right there. Hopefully, Lumpkin's slave jail. This is obviously a relatively recent picture, right? This article was written in November of 19, right before the pandemic hit. All right, and this is in Richmond. This is a picture taken in Richmond, Virginia. It's the site of where this slave jail was. All right, says the property. I'm not give y'all too much here. Says the property. The property of the slave dealer in perspective. There are a few other terms. Okay, that will need to be explained. You have breeding farms, which we talked about. Carter's Sequitur Ventrum, I think is how you pronounce that. We're gonna get into that real quick. Coffles, Lumpkin's Alley, and the African burial ground and slave rings. All right, these are all terms that are going to be talked about in this article. It says Richmond was this one of the second largest. Now this says second, the other one says first. Either way, it was either one or two. All right, it was one of the second largest center in America for the sale of slaves, only second to New Orleans. I don't think that part is accurate totally based on everything I've looked up. I think New Orleans was up there, but I think Maryland was number two and Virginia was number one, actually. But to put it charitably, Virginia had a surplus of slaves due to the decline in tobacco production and the practice of slave breeding. So this is how this shook out historically. Um, Initially, tobacco, sugar, and I believe corn or rice were the primary crops that the suppressor used slave labor for. All right, but around shortly after the Revolutionary War, right? Because then they said we don't need y'all, Britain. Well, they got a lot of business from Britain. Was really what happened. So now, since y'all don't need us, we're not buying from y'all no more because now we don't like y'all, right? So then that dried up. Same thing happened in the Caribbean, similar type things, especially after Haiti had their revolt, right, and took over. So once these things happen, then the need started to dry up. At the same time, they had already been producing slaves in these breeding farms. So then there was this huge surplus. Now, around the same time of this, you had, I believe it was the shucks, Industrial Renaissance, I believe is what it is. I had to get the term. I think we're going to get it in here. But essentially, you had a need globally for, who can guess? There was a particular crop that there was a need that became global for. Who can guess what that crop is? I've named tobacco. It wasn't that. Corn, rice, sugar. It was none of that. Who can give it to me? I know somebody's going to get it. Officer Quishar in the building. Shalom, how about Shalom Shabbat? Who can tell me what that crop was that became uh, that there became a great need for? All happening around the same time. Who wants to give it a shot? All right, give Sister Eye a hand. Cotton. Cotton started being big all around the world, so that became something that needed to be exported. At the same time, you had the cotton gin come, which was allowed the oppressor to process the cotton faster, which means you needed more slaves to pick it. Well, they needed to pick it more. faster, more by each one, so on and so forth, right? So that created, go back. All right. It says to put it terribly, Virginia had the surplus of slaves due to decline in tobacco production and the practice of slave breeding. The forced continual mating of slaves for the purpose of bearing children that could later be sold. Again, I just want to stress this enough so that we don't have the misconception that this was something that was just a natural thing. Natural increase is another term that we're going to get into tonight because that's what they called it, natural increase. That sounds like, oh, just the natural, we're getting together, even though we're enslaved and we're having children. It was deeper than that. It was bigger than that. All right. Says many of these children were America's attempt at eugenics, an attempt it rarely talks about. This is the actual, and I believe Officer Yagadar talks about it often. These eugenics were the effort of America. All right. Because if it comes up in the history books at all in the history books, it describes laws preventing the enfeebled from marrying and sterilization of the poor, immoral, and disabled. They don't mention the breeding of the biggest, strongest black bucks because that's what we were essentially boiled down to, just as you would speak about a livestock. But they would breed the biggest, strongest black quote unquote bucks with the best quote unquote breeders, which is what they called our sisters. Colonial Americans broke with the British tradition. Now check this out. Colonial Americans broke with the British tradition, where the children followed the father's heritage. What does that sound like? What does that sound like? Sounds to me like you are what your father is. They got that from us. All right. But they broke with that tradition. That's what they were doing. But because that wouldn't necessarily get you, that wasn't guaranteed to get you the child that woman produced, then where is it? Oh, it's like it says they instead implemented partus sequitur ventrum, which is weird word. I believe that's Latin. Um, but it says under which children born to slaves would be what their mother was, ensuring that children of slaves would also be slaves, not gaining their freedom as in forms of servitude and slavery in most parts of the world. The same law established that white men could not be found to have sexually assaulted their slaves, making it essentially a legalized practice. So when we say in our when we say in our classes, when we say on the street what this oppressor has done to our people, this is not made up. It's absolutely true. So much of it still goes on. But on top of that, this was not this was so diabolically thought out. So often it was diabolically thought out. Because whether it was the oppressor or whether it was a fellow slave, oftentimes, especially when it's a fellow slave, neither one of them wanted to to necessarily do that. But that's not how this operated. This was you're going to be with him and you're going to be with her. At best, it was just those two. The other term for Stockman, I actually had y'all heard about, is um, there's two versions that I've heard. One was that you would have a brother locked in a room with a bunch of sisters, and he was expected to produce. The other one I saw was literally brothers in a room with their feet in the stocks. I know those, what is the stock and the joint, the whole wood. They would have their feet in there. on their back, and the sisters were told what to do. The absolute violation of our people, purposefully, for the purpose of of reproducing us, so that we could then be sold. This is what a lot of times what this country wants us to believe. You hear that term. Well, Africans sold Africa, and it was just part of what was not normal back then. They want absolutely no accountability, no recourse, no blame. They don't want any of the repercussions that they know are going to come. Zechariah 11:5. Whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. And they that sell them say, Blessed be the Lord, for I am rich. That's what this is describing. They hold themselves not guilty. They submitted us to absolute sexual abuse so that they could then sell us, say, I am rich, and not be accountable for it. All right, let's get back to the article. All right, it says Virginia slave owners would bring their excess slaves to Richmond slave markets for sale to southern plantations. And at the same time, agents of the largest traders would solicit individual farms and plantations, offering to sell their slaves for them. This is. I'm a broker a deal. I'm a broker a deal. Hey, listen, we're gonna be out here doing this anyway. I know you got some slaves you want. Hey, come on, I'm gonna hook you up. And they wonder why we say the oppressor is the devil the Bible speaks of. You have to have an absolute lack of compassion for anyone to be able to conduct yourself in this manner. Because farmers that had failed to properly rotate their crops were experiencing low yields, and the sale of their often inherited slaves was like found money. In what was called Lumpkin's Alley, multiple slave jails were located, all just a few blocks from the present day Capitol building. This is the Capitol building in Richmond, Virginia. That's what this is talking about. Lumpkin's Alley was where there were multiple slave jails, quote unquote jails, within a few blocks of the Capitol building. It says slaves headed to Florida and New Orleans might be sent by boat. Slaves headed west or southwest had to walk. Some to what is now West Virginia, where they could then catch a boat. Others to points as far as Georgia and Alabama. They had to walk. Now listen, we just wrapped up the Day of Atonement, and that wasn't exactly easy for us. But it won't walk into Georgia, though, was it? It wasn't walking to West Virginia. It wasn't the kind of suffering that our ancestors had to deal with. The slaves were paired together with iron rings around their necks. Who has the precept for that? Who wants to give me the precept for that? Paired together with iron rings around their necks. Who wants to give me the precept for that? Let's see who's going to get it. I don't y'all all speak at once. Who gonna give me my precept? Come on. We're gonna give it a shot. All right. All right, Stephen Baldwin. Stephen Baldwin says shackles. He's on the right track. I'm looking for the actual scripture, brother. Looking for the actual scripture. All right. I'll give Officer Yagadar a hand. He's always on it. Always on it. Deuteronomy 28 and 48 says, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Most High shall send against thee. We serve our enemies then, we serve our enemies now, which is why we call, in ISUPK, we call our quote unquote jobs, our 9 to 5, we call that our slavery, because that's exactly what it is. We are serving another nation as we do it. All right. This is our job. All right. It says in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in the want of all things. This is talking about resources. This is talking about resources in our communities or the lack thereof. This is also talking about the fact that anything that we want, whether it be clothing, whether it be food, in all things, anything we want, we essentially, by and large, have to go to another nation to get it. All right. It says, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he hath destroyed thee. That is an excellent precept. That's exactly what I was looking for. The water, brother. All right. Um, I'm gonna keep going. Again, this is talking about this jail. All right. This quote unquote slave jail that was essentially a breeding farm, a smaller breeding farm, but a breeding farm. It says how it earned its nickname, the Devil's Half Acre, because that's what they called it. Was because of the harsh conditions that and Lumpkin's cruelty. You may have seen images of how slaves were packed into slave ships for the Middle Passage. We've all seen that. Lumpkin did similar, but just on dry land. This is how he kept our ancestors. So check this out. It says when Lumpkin died, Salakia, hold on. It talks about how, let me scroll it up so I can see. It talks about how he, uh, where is it? I'll point y'all to it real quick. Right down here. Y'all can see where my mouse is, right? It says Lumpkin bought a light-skinned slave girl named Mary at age 12. At age 12. And he had 5 children with this 12-year-old. At least for the first one, she was 12. 12 years old. All right. But an interesting twist says when he died, she inherited the land, which she ultimately sold to a Baptist minister. And this just gives you some history about Virginia, because this just threw me off. I had to process, right? Gave it to a Baptist minister named Nathaniel Culver, looking to establish an all-black seminary, all Christian, that later became the site for Virginia Union University. Virginia Union University has its ties to a slave jail and a breeding farm. And this is part of the issue with Christianity. Because who wants that legacy? Who wants that land if you have pride and love for your people? Who wants that property when you know the atrocities that went on there? The abuse that your people took. I tell you who wants it. Christians. Because in Christianity, you got to love everybody. You have to love the person who destroyed your people. And as a almost a super insult, in my opinion, it was called the Devil's Half Acre. Who can guess what it's called? What they essentially try to call it now, or not now, but when they took it over. Who can guess what they called it when they took it over? It was called the Devil's Half Acre. Who can tell me? Who can guess what they called it once the Christians took it over? Who can guess? Close. Close. Give up so y'all can down here. He on the right track. He on the right track. He said promised land or heaven, some garbage like that. Right. They called it, it was the devil's half acre. So now it's God's half acre because all of a sudden it's okay. All of a sudden now everything's fine. Your people were destroyed there. Matter of fact, let's keep going on some more descriptions about how this uh, jail and prison was run. Going back to why, not back to, but the reason why it's got its name. All right. Says the enslaved people were often given hoods or bags. We talked about this, I believe, last class in reference to the term MF. All right. It says the enslaved people were often given hoods or bags over their heads to keep them from knowing who they were having forced sex with. And we know we if anybody remembers, we talked about that last class. Matter of fact, let me keep going. It says it could be someone they know, perhaps a niece, an aunt, a sister, or a mother. Of course, that's essentially the origin for that term, that cuss word, because they would have you do that with a bag on your head to your mother or any other female in your family. All right. Says the breeders only wanted a child that could be sold. That's it. They did not care. Again, I don't know how much of a wicked, bloodthirsty beast you got to be, but that's their method of operation. That's what they do. That's who they are. All right. Says Richmond was a port that exported 10,000 to 20,000 enslaved people a month to states further south and west. Slavery, not tobacco, was Virginia's primary domestic crop. That's not taught anywhere except the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. You're not going to get this type of information anywhere. That's not taught in schools. That's not taught in your Christian church. No politician is going to talk about it. This is Virginia's history. 10,000 to 20,000 enslaved people a month. And again, this goes back to this whole thing that, well, we all got something mixed with us and nobody, no, whatever. You can't create that many slaves from an oppressor, from how few oppressors there were by comparison. And we're going to get into some of those numbers too. This was us being forced to be with us to create our children so that then they could just be sold away. Where is it? Deuteronomy 28 and 32. So much of this is coming out of Deuteronomy because so much of it is the prophecies that the Most High gave us to warn us not to break His law, statutes, and commandments. But here we are because our ancestors couldn't do it. They couldn't keep the law. They decided, let me not say couldn't. They didn't keep the law, statutes, and commandments, which is why our people went through this and why we continue to suffer today. Deuteronomy 28 and 32. It's like I almost put the wrong one. It says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Now, this is so, and this is the whole deal. This is how you know this book is about us, and we continue to repeat, right? The initial taking, when we first were put on those slave ships, that could be the sons and daughters will be taken and given to another people. Then we're here under slavery, and this oppressor had no problem breaking up our families, breaking up our households, the what we could put together in such a terrible situation. We still tried, and they used it as coercion at one point to make sure we stayed in line. They'd sell our children off. This is a whole nother thing. This is we were forced to produce children for the purpose of selling them away. It says, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. We think about what our people went through. In a lot of ways, or in a lot of descriptions here about this subject, our sisters were, one, brought in to this forced reproduction as early as they could be. As soon as they came on their flower, okay. And then they were expected, they were essentially sexually abused with the expectation that they would then have a child, with the then secondary abuse of having that child taken away, because oftentimes they were not raising their own children. The children was given off to someone else to raise. Why? Who can tell me why that child was given off to someone else to raise? Who can guess what the purpose of that is? We're gonna give this child that she just had to another Israelite slave, so that person can raise it. What's the purpose of that? All right, sister says so they could not build families. All right, and that's not necessarily wrong. Officer Yagadar said the same. They could destroy the bond of connection. Similar answer. All right, I want y'all to think. Well, no, I don't think about it that way. Let me give it to y'all. Time sake. The purpose was because once the child was born, within a few weeks to a month, she was expected to be pregnant again. She can't be raising no kid. There you go. Let me see. Sister I said to continue to break the bonds, and that's not, again, it's not wrong. That's absolutely true. Um, Officer Yagadar gave him a hand. He said to get her back to work, and that work was just having children, forcibly having children. Sister I said for money. That's about right also, because all of this, the grand scheme of it was to create more money. All right. All right. We'll get back to it. It says enslaved people could be shipped by rail and boat, allowing them to arrive in better conditions, and thus fetch a higher price. Because if obviously you put somebody on a train or a boat, they're gonna get there and be in better condition than if you have them walk from here to freaking Georgia, right? But that was a purposeful thing. That was part of the business. All right. So despite the ban on importing enslaved people, there was still some limited smuggling of enslaved, right? But it says the South was making and selling enough enslaved people internally that the slave trade was reducing prices for enslaved people and cutting into profit. Meaning they were so plentiful. Because if you think about it, anytime you have a quote unquote black market smuggling of a product, it's hard for me to say sometimes. Anytime you have that type of situation, you theoretically ramp up the price. You theoretically ramp up the price. You're going to pay more for something illegal than you're going to pay for it legally, unless, well, typically that's what happens because there's a risk associated with it. That's what people do, right? But in this situation, we were being produced here in America at such a scale that it was killing the smuggling business. It's so plentiful. They were selling in bulk. So I don't need you. I don't need you smuggled Israelites. I got them in Virginia, man. They cranking them out like it's nothing. Damn shame. Whoop, doing too much on my computer. Um, but then this goes back to the ultimate kind of where I started class with. Uh, uh, it says this was one of the reasons why the importation of enslaved people was bad, not because of humanitarian concern, not because they thought this was wrong, not because they realized, oh, we can't do this. Definitely not because of Christianity, but for economic reasons. This was about money. All right, I think that's it on that. We're gonna keep going to some more though. All right, so who has any idea? Y'all may or may not have heard of it. Who has any idea how, um, in addition to the cotton piece that we just went over and the export of cotton, right? How else did the international market benefit from the enslavement of Israelites? Does anybody have an idea? If you got an idea, give me a one. Give me what you got, or just give me what you got. You don't need to give me a one. If you don't, give me a two. Let's see. How else did the international market benefit? Virtually no labor costs. All right, that's true. Okay, let me rephrase my question because I see where you're going and you're right. How did the international market benefit from our slavery here in America? Now, the labor costs, they wouldn't necessarily. Well, I guess you could argue that they benefited from the labor costs from it would have cost more if um, if they had to pay for our labor. You can argue that, now, and if that's where you're going, I see what you mean. But there's something else specifically. I'm gonna give y'all a hint that may give it away. It has to do with banking, actually. Cheap goods. Okay, that's along the same lines of what I believe Officer Yagadar was saying. Again, not wrong. Not wrong. All right, for time's sake. I think I'm gonna give it to y'all. So I'm gonna tell y'all to read this first. No, wait. That's not doing it. That might be the one I have to give y'all right now. Mm, This is where it is. Now, bear with me, bear with me. All right, let's see if I can pull this one up. Trade, all right. Um, Again, all good answers, all good answers. Not that's true, right? Because it would have been, the trade would have been more expensive. The goods would have been more expensive. No labor cost means more expensive goods. Y'all are all right in that sense. But it was a lot deeper than that. Matter of fact, it was a lot deeper than that. All right. Let's see. Y'all might not be able to see that. Probably not. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Still might not be able to see it too well. But it's here. No, that's gonna be too much. Yeah. All right. So this says, as overseers and plantain owners managed a forced labor system aimed at maximizing efficiency, they interacted with a network of bankers and accountants and took out lines of credit and mortgages, all to manage America's empire of cotton. Right? This is business. This is what they're doing. But then it says the slavery economy of the U.S. South is deeply tied financially to the North, to Britain, to the point that we can say that people who were buying financial products in these other places were in effect owning slaves and were extracting money from the labor of enslaved people. Now, that's a loose description of it. What was really happening was, um, and this is where it started, right? This is when this thing started. So y'all check this out. It says a Kentucky business partner, cat's name was Moorhead and Latham. It said increasingly found themselves in debt to the Bank of Kentucky. In October of 1817, they mortgaged 20 slaves and several tracts of land to the bank as collateral for their debts. So they needed money. They said, we'll give you this collateral, we'll give you this land, and we'll give you these 20 slaves. And what would happen is, um, is that where it is? It says, yeah, it says 2 years later, another man named by the name of Vance endorsed a bill of exchange drawn by Michael and Latham, in which he were required to pay back in 90 days. Vance also was worried about the risk, so he also took a lien on slaves. Now, where is the rest of that? Long story short, what banks do and was when we're doing then would take mortgages, right? Bind them together and then sell bonds. When you sell a bond backed by a mortgage, anybody can buy that bond. You can be anywhere in the world, and even then, anywhere in the world, they could buy that bond. So they were essentially buying bonds backed by slaves. They were making a return on it, all of that. And this is what people don't talk about. This is what schools don't teach. Again, the politicians are not going to tell you this, and your pastor's not going to tell you this. When we say everyone benefited in one way, shape, or form from our enslavement, from the enslavement of the 12 tribes of Israel, it's exactly what we mean. And the history is there to prove it. Anybody, anywhere in the world who bought a mortgage-backed bond was likely buying a bond that was secured in one way, shape, or form by slaves. But yet the argument is, well, it didn't affect that many people. Not that many people own slaves, but plenty of people benefited from it. And you all made great points about the cheaper goods and the trade and no labor costs and all that. Absolutely. This oppressive, wicked kingdom benefited the most, but everyone benefited in some way, shape, or form. Even more so when they stopped the transatlantic slave trade, when they stopped participating, let me rephrase, in the transatlantic slave trade. Even more so. All right. That's that. That's that. Right, exactly. Give Officer Yagadan a hand. The entire financial system was created off our torture, sexual abuse, unaliving, and destruction. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's absolutely accurate that our destruction fueled and continues to fuel this country, whether it be their financial systems, uh, uh, whether it be obviously the jail system is part of the financial system, honestly. Um, Honestly, whether it be from our advances, because we are the salt of the earth, because we are God's chosen people. That's part of the reason why, in addition to slavery and the financial benefits that this country has gotten, just our presence here, just our presence here benefits them and continues to. That's why we say it all the time. They act like they want us to go. Well, if you don't like it, leave. You don't really. They don't really want us to go nowhere. They don't want us to go anywhere. They don't want us. They also don't want us to wake up and realize who we're supposed to be. Who not supposed to be. Who we are. They don't want us to realize that we're God's chosen people. They don't want to realize us to realize that we're the 12 tribes of Israel. Because if we come back and start following these laws, statutes, and commandments, that then gives us the power. That gives us the protection of the Most High. And for the record, it's not magical. It's absolutely not magical. The laws themselves force us to conduct ourselves in a way that not only will we take care of each other, but then the Most High will be on our side. Slack. Right, as the sister said, they cannot make it without us. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They cannot make it without us. And that reality is why they're so petrified. It's why they're always just so scared of us and all of that. And it's why they need to keep us in the position that we're in. Because they need us. We really don't need them. We need the Most High. We need to follow these laws, statutes, and commandments. We need to make sure we're doing things like the Day of Atonement, Memorial blowing the trumpets. We need to make sure we're following those things because we need the Most High's protection. That's what we need. And the proof is in the fact that we don't have it. Absolutely don't have it. All right. Let me see. Yeah, we'll go with that piece. So this is another one of those myths that we talked about. So that's also why the more we separate from them, the harder they push to bring us back into spending our money on them. Exactly. Pay our taxes to them, marry them, etc. Absolutely right. Give that sister a hand. That's why they have such a problem with ISUPK. The sad part is our people have a bigger problem with it than they do. The sad part is our people come up against us more sometimes when we're telling our people to wake up. But she is absolutely right. They'd rather us continue to funnel all of our resources into this country because that's our greatest benefit to them. Our slave labor through the prison system, and the fact that even when we're not, we give all of our resources right back to them. That's so rare for any other culture. Let's see. Fiagadar says guilty conscience because payback will be brutal and non-ending or willing. Exactly. Damn right. Damn right. Damn right. And that's another reason why they're so quick to again call themselves guilty. They don't call. They don't want to own that guilt. They want to convince themselves that no, it wasn't me. That's not happening now. That was back then. So on and so forth. They don't want any actual accountability for it because they know what's coming. They know what they did. And even listen, even if you don't even believe in the scriptures, right? Karma tells you that. That's what they talk about. Karma and all that. That will be enough to tell you, you got to pay for it. Justice is something that they talk about. Okay, justice, you got to pay for this. Accountability. Hey, listen, when you owe somebody something, you pretty much have to pay. I mean, worst case scenario, your kids can inherit debt. That happens for everybody except the suppressor. They don't want that. They don't want any of that. Let's see. My rep says self-hate embedded in us from slavery. Absolutely right. That is another absolute truth. This is something else I read about that self-hate, right? On certain plantations, I forgot the brother's name. I think he was out of Brazil. I read about. The legend says that brother had over 200 children. Had over 200 children because um, his oppressor. That's what he was there for. He was there to create with as many uh, uh, forcibly have sex with as many enslaved women as he could for the sole purpose of creating another child. That was his purpose, and what that created because that was his purpose, he didn't have to work hard. He had a relatively easy life, other than being forced to be with all these women, which is traumatic enough. Traumatic enough. That's not. I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to downplay that. But because the other slaves saw this, that created a hatred. And oftentimes in these situations, um, those who were chose for breeding did not have to deal with the hell and the torment and the torture that the rest of our people had to deal with. And that in and of itself oftentimes created animosity, among so many other things, right? But it was, again, just another way that we have this embedded self hate, as the sister said, another way that they created these dynamics between us, because all of it's unnatural. None of this is natural, especially not natural. Let me rephrase: it's not natural for us. It's not natural for us. And because of that, it creates all these byproducts of further destruction in our community. All right. Miss Coco in the building. Shalom, sir. All right. Um. Okay. Going back to again the just purposeful nature of this. All right. The further purposeful nature, the diabolical nature of this oppressor. All right. So there's another myth, and this is just talking about different myths, is that slavery in and of itself was an as an economic system was unchanging, meaning that was just something that happened for a time, and it was just what was accepted at the time, and so on and so forth, as if it there was no purpose behind it and no attempt to keep it going past any time period really, but definitely past the Civil War. When a lot of times people try to convince um, or try to make an argument is that it was always the same and then it ended. You know, what it says the difference, of course, is that this is not the work. Oh, it's talking about how the difference of how you keep um, people so-called motivated, right? Says the difference though is that this is not the work of wage workers or professional workers. It is the work of enslaved people. And the incentive is not to do this or you'll get fired or you won't get a raise. The incentive is that you don't do this, you will get whipped or worse. And that's, again, if y'all think back to what I just said about how once the other crops started going down and cotton started coming up, well, now we have a higher demand. We got the cotton gin, we got all these inventions that allow us to process more. So now we need more out of you. So just like when you're on your slavery, and hey, they start laying off people, maybe you're one of the ones that's left. Oh, the level of work has to keep up or be better. We just got rid of some people, but anybody who's here, you better keep up. This is the same mentality they had back then. The only difference was there was no threat of losing your slavery at the time. There was no threat of not getting a raise. Now, if you don't keep up, I'm going to physically abuse you. I might unalive you. I might unalive one of your family members if you have any here. And even if I don't, I might just sell one of them away. A lot of this oppressive nature does not change. It's the same method, different circumstances. And again, this is why we call our 9 to 5s our slavery, because it's the same type of approach. And again, this is all for the benefit of another nation. Keep going. It says cotton was the number one export from the U.S., which was largely an export-driven economy, as was uh, as it was modernizing and shifting into industrialization. And the slavery economy of the U.S. South was deeply tied financially to the North, to Britain, to the point, and we can say the people. Oh, wait a minute, did I read this before? Yes, I did read this before. I'll read it again. The point that people who were buying financial products in these other places were in effect owning slaves and were certainly extracting money from the labor of enslaved people. And this is for, when people say, well, we didn't, the North didn't have slaves and the North didn't do this and the North didn't do that. And everybody didn't have it. Everybody benefited. It was such a massive undertaking, a purposeful, continually destructive system. Everyone benefited. Uh, Is that what I want? Yeah, let's get that too. Again, this is, I think, this is talking about, right, the numbers. Is that what this is talking about? I pulled so much information. Good night. That's not what I want. Salaki. 1 second, y'all. This might be what I want. All right, this gives some perspective. Again, more perspective on the slave farms. Again, y'all may not be able to see it. I'm trying to make it as large as I can. Well, I might be able to see that. Let's start here. It says enslavers had financial interest in enslaved people's reproduction, as children born to slaves, enslaved women inherited their mothers' enslaved status. This natural increase, remember I talked about that earlier. That's the term that they use. This natural increase, as it was termed, in the rich enslavers' bottom line. Nowhere was this more so than in Virginia and other states of the upper South, which the other state that they're referencing is essentially Maryland. All right. It says we're a large enslaved population. The ending of the transatlantic slave trade is declining of the agricultural sector. Again, when I talked about tobacco and sugar and corn and rice, combined to make it profitable for enslavers to sell their surplus slave labor to the booming cotton states of the lower South. It says compared enslavers' right. Oh, like enslavers' right to increase. This is a quote. Increase their enslaved women to that of the owner of brood mares. That's what this delegate compared it to, and noted that this increase consists of much of our wealth. This is the wealth. This is how this country's wealth was built, and it kind of took off even more, ironically, after the ending of the transatlantic slave trade. It took off even more. It says Thomas Jefferson Randolph, which was Thomas Jefferson, the president's nephew, I believe, noted that 8,500 enslaved people were exported annually from Virginia to the Deep South, and said it's a practice and an increasing practice in Virginia of in parts of Virginia to rear slaves for market. That's what was going on. And we saw earlier in another article they were 10 to 20,000 a month. It got up to that high. All right. Uh, I don't think this is the one I was looking for. Mhm. Bear with me. Come on. All right, bear with me, though. That's not it. Where is it? So many articles. I'm not just saying. No, I know exactly what I want. Slovakia. Okay, here we go. We're gonna get some of these. We're gonna bring this kind of down to our last few minutes. More what I call kind of more real information, right? Because so far it's been a lot of stories. I mean, not stories. It's been a lot of information. But here's um, some actual stories. Like right here says the sun. You this is way too small for y'all to see, but it says the sublets also tell a story, and this is in reference to a book that was written by I believe it's a husband and wife whose last name was Sublet. The sublets also tell a story of an enslaved woman named Celia who was purchased uh, who was purchased to be a sex slave and sexually abused moments after her purchase. After years of abuse, Celia refuses her master's advances and hits him over the head, killing him, unaliving him. Salaki. She is caught and charged for the unaliving. Celia claimed that she was the victim of sexual abuse and that she was defending herself. Uh, there was then legally no such thing as the sexual abuse of an enslaved woman. Missouri court effectively affirmed the sexual abuse was legally what good Lord, I'm not gonna try to pronounce that name. Legally, what Hartman calls the normative condition for enslaved women in the state. Celia was hung at age 19 for unaliving the man who sexually abused her. What the sublets did not reveal in the book is that Celia was pregnant when she was sentenced, and the judge waited until after she gave birth to hang her. They waited until she had that baby because that baby was of value to this wicked kingdom, to this wicked oppressor. He even understood. The judge in the case even understood that, oh, she's pregnant? No, we can't do that too quick. We can't do that too quick. There's something of value to me. There's a cash crop in her stomach, and I need to make sure I reap the benefits of it. My people, because he was the judge, his people needed to reap the benefits of it. Officer Yagadar says no amount of reparations will be equitable to what we have endured as a people and what we endure now. He is absolutely correct. He's absolutely correct. He is absolutely correct. There is no amount that they could pay. There's no amount that's enough. Like I said, I mean, you think about even on the low end, 8,500, I think it was that we just read, 8,500 um, um, slaves exported out of Virginia a month, right? Think about how many people, how many, because typically when they were sold off like that, they were young teens, young teens just getting to the point that you know what we can put them to work, just getting to the point that you know what she's ready to have some children, she's ready to be bred. So that's what they would say. But think about 8,500 a month of our people, our children, being sent off across these United States of America. Think about the generational trauma that brings on, not just for the parent who loses the child, but for the child. Think about the bonds, as you all referenced earlier, the bonds that are broken, that are irreparable. And this was not here and there. This was purposefully done on a mass scale. Our sisters' wounds, They treated them like it was farmland. They treated our sisters like they were farmland, forcing them to be sexually abused and forcing us to sexually abuse them. Because to not do it meant you would be whipped or worse. This is the diabolical nature of this oppressor. It's so much worse than just, I mean, it's bad enough to enslave a people for 400 years and then follow that up with another 100 years of um, 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 sanctioned abuse, sanctioned discrimination, sanctioned mistreatment by the government. It's bad enough for all that. But during that time, you purposefully stopped your participation in the transatlantic slave trade so you can make your slaves more valuable. And then you participated in a program to treat us as I mean, let's be real. Mike Vick, Michael Vick went to jail because some dog fight ring, some dogs went on. Typically, this oppressor would rather, or yeah, would rather treat an animal, particularly a dog, with greater respect than they treat us. And think about it. There are plenty dog breeders out here, right? And one of the things, and a lot of them, especially the official ones, are oppressors. And if anybody's ever looked into it, they talk about how well they treat their animals, how they try to make them so comfortable and happy, and how they know that you can't, just overbreed a female, and they have to have a, connection between the male and the female. We're talking about dogs, and they treated us worse than that. They treated us worse than you would treat livestock. There's a certain amount of humanity, compassion that you're going to have on livestock. They don't do that with plants. That's what they did. And that's why we became America's other cash crop, more valuable at a point than all of their other cash crops combined. All right. And with that, oh, great point. Great point. Sister I said human trafficking today of young black girls. Exactly. Exactly. The same type of thing still going on today. And again, that's the further proof that we are the lost children of the house of Israel. Because these prophecies apply to us and only us. All right. With that, if there are any questions, y'all let me know. If not, we're going to get to these security announcements in a short. Y'all let me know. Make sure there's no other, like there was some other quick notations I wanted to give y'all. Here's another one. Here's another good example. We just gave an example, right, of a firsthand perspective about a thing. Here's another one. It says Stanley Feldstein, once a slave, which is a book, talks about a slave owner who kept 50 to 60 slaves for breeding alone. That was their whole purpose. Trying to see if any other stud Negroes. Horrible. Here it was. Uh, y'all bear with me. I know we're a little over the time. Y'all bear with me. I want to get to this last piece. Nah, it's not gonna be it either. All right, I missed. Can't find that last piece. All right, no sweat. No sweat. If I'm able to find it, I may bring it up next class just so y'all have the perspective. Um, with that being said, I don't see any questions, so we're gonna get to the security announcements. All right. Okay. There we go. We're the Israelites, Slocky. We're the ISUPK started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Roof for new brother and sister. When a brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. All right, let me get through these and then I do see a question. They are off limits for 6 months. They are able to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if the brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. Uh, there's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6 month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. You can find it in Numbers 18 and 21, or Malachi 3, verses 8 through 10. It means the tenth in the Hebrew, which is ma'ashara, 10% of any penny of any increase that the Most High gives you. You give it to the Treasury Department. You can also go to isupk.com and set it up through PayPal. All right. The priest fund, which is a free will offering for a priest, is not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you want to give. Upcoming holy days, I'm not sure. I don't think we have any coming up relatively soon, but don't quote me on that. I will double check and we will get you the information on that. All right. Um, And if any brother wants to be a trooper in the school, you can start wearing all black. That's black boots, shirts, headband, war scarf, and pants. Make sure you get in contact with the school, or either Officer Yarash Ahmad or Captain Natazak and shout and let them know that's what you want to do. All right. And we did have a question. Let me see. Mr. Ryan says, real quick, someone asked me, who are the white Israelite people? I said, there isn't any. And you are absolutely right. You're absolutely right there. Let me see what else you got. Said what would have been a better answer? That's a fine. I mean, not fine answer. That's a true answer. They're not going to understand what you mean. Now, my assumption is the question was about white so-called Jewish people, because there's no one claiming to be Israelites other than uh, really so-called Black Hispanics and Native Indians. Um, And again, if you're not in the ISUPK, you are not in the truth. But my guess is that they're probably speaking about look, you're always on it. That's my man. When I tell you, obviously, Dog be having my back. I'm gonna get back to your question, sis. Feast of Tabernacle, which is September 29th through October 7th. Owada. I appreciate it, brother. My guess is that they're talking about the so-called Jewish people who are in Israel. They are Israelis. They are not Israelite. That where you can what you can give them is a couple things. You can say they are Jewish. They're not Jews. You can tell someone. You can point them to Deuteronomy 28. Um, and talk about and explain to them that the curses that the Most High or that Moses prophesied and was given to Moses from the Most High, they haven't they haven't experienced any of those curses. Only there's only a certain people on earth who has. And again, right today, they're so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians. All right. Um, There we go. Officer Yagadar is absolutely on it. I was going to pull those. You can also point them to Revelations 2 and 9. This is Christ speaking in Revelation 2 and 9. It says, I know thy works. Now he's talking to the churches of the Israelites. All right. He says, I know thy works and tribulations and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy, and this is the part, I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not. This is Christ saying that there is a people who are going to claim that they are Jews and are not. And the people that are the Jews, the ones that he is talking to, he's telling them, I know your works, I know your tribulation, and I know your poverty. But you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews but are not. But, as the scripture goes on, are the synagogue of Satan. Jews meet in synagogues. All right. So that's one way. Let me see. Revelations 3 and 9. Yep, it says, behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan. That's another reference, a reference to who the imposters are, who the people who say they are Jews but are not is. All right. And it goes on. It says, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them come. Salakia, I will make them, Salakia, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet and to know that I have loved thee. So there are certain people who are not, who are absolutely not um, uh, uh, the children of Israel. They are not the Jews, but they are going to claim to be. All right, and those are two definitely good ones. And again, the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. You can talk about. I'm assuming that this is a woman, hopefully a sister that you are talking to. If it is a man, you do not need to have that conversation. I know you know that, sis, but I just want to make sure that I'm saying that for the other sisters on here too. All right, these are not conversations that sisters should be having with men. Um, and honestly, if there is a man, and this goes for any sister in school, if there is a man who has questions about this, then they need to, though that man needs to contact the school. All right. And if you don't have the number, matter of fact, any sister who may not have the number to the school, I'm gonna give it out right now. All right, it's 757-550-1204. Again, 757-550-1204. Any sister who gets any type of questions from a man, just have him contact the school so he can get it straight. All right. All right. No sweat. Real sad. I didn't want to teach, but that sounds much more knowledgeable. Understood. Understood. Again, if it's the sister that you're talking to, you can have those conversations and still give her the number. But definitely, if it's a brother that's asking you those questions, anybody out here who might, they might see you, the Shield of David and have questions, just give them the school's number. All right. All right. With that, there are no other questions. I'm gonna say shalom. Yahweh Shem Shabbat to the brothers. Shalom Yahweh Shema Alatham by Hashem Yahweh Shah to the sisters. Shalom Israel.